You are listening to Frog Talk, presented by Black Ribbon.
Welcome to another episode of Frog Talk. Today, we're exploring how product leaders build resilient, high-performing teams while navigating the rapid transformation brought by AI. From the chaos of startup survival mode to the complexity of scaling global products. I'm joined by Miguel Caballero Pinto, software engineering manager at Harmonic AI, where he leads the Flow team, helping reinvent how venture capital firms operate by turning Harmonic's knowledge graph into an AI-native operating hub. With over 15 years of experience, Miguel has shipped products at Microsoft, including Skype, Office, and Visual Studio, co-founded startups in B2B and B2C markets, and is also a public speaker, giving talks on applying the startup mindset to established organizations and building resilient team cultures. He also advises early-stage founders across multiple startup ecosystems. Welcome, Miguel.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Nader. Glad to be here.
Yeah, me too. I'm glad that you're here as well. That's quite a resume you have there. I'd love to just really start with your journey. I like to just dive in and ask about how this all got started. What sort of drove you? I always ask, like, when you were 5 years old, were you like, I want to grow up and work on AI products and software teams?
Yeah, it's actually funny because the way it started is actually, my mother always just bought me the latest computers, and they will always have the latest computers at home. She loves tech, but I always like to use the computer myself. So I have a brother and a sister. So the first time that I come into an application or code my own application was when I created like a little kind of like a script in the computer that only allowed it to be used if you know some sort of password, right? So my brother couldn't use it, and I was the only one using it. That was the first time that I programmed the first application. From there, I just university and then working at Microsoft and startups. I've always been passionate about building, really. Coding is kind of like the tool, but I've always been like passionate about building.
Were you the kid that like took things apart?
Yes. Always breaking things, the remote control, all the cars, the toys that they gave me, yeah.
Just to see how it works.
See how it works. I've been changing it, breaking it. Yeah, I was being like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And breaking the computer,
man.
as well. Yeah, most of the time.
So you've experienced both the structured world of Microsoft shipping global products and also the scrappy chaos of startup life. What's the most important lesson that you've learned about building team culture that sort of translates across both?
Yeah. So to me, it sounds like a little bit of a cliche, but to me, like, I think fostering collaboration, it really is the most important thing, regardless of how big your company is, right? For the teams to execute a maximum capacity, you have to have really strong collaboration that kind of like multiplies, the interactions, and ultimately the output is greater. I remember, when I was at Microsoft, that was in Balmer era. There was this comic that you would see about Microsoft, where like you see every department was kind of like the picture, pointing guns at each other. It was kind of like examples how not to have a collaboration team culture. And I remember when, like, because I was lucky enough to see transition from Balmer to Satya. And like, I remember when Satya came, one of the best things that he did is kind of like foster collaboration through having one common vision and one common language across Microsoft. And that was kind of like one of the lessons that I learned back then. And then even in startups these days, if you think about like how we operate at Harmonic, collaboration is actually at the center of how we work. And then we go from, you can see people going, above and beyond to help each other. You can think, you can find yourselves maybe struggling, and someone just coming and say, "Hey, man, I saw you struggling. I look at X, Y, and Z. I think this is not the issue. I think we should look into this other thing." So they go the extra mile, right? And then I think that's what multiply the teams ultimately.
I guess in both a startup and a more established environment, the biggest struggle that every leader really faces, any manager, any leader, the established and the startup space are very different in terms of speed and dynamics and so on. For example, one thing that stands out to me is a lot of excuse me, a lot of talent strategists, culture strategists, maybe even HR folks will often talk about the right butts in the right seats, hiring for the job, making sure that the person in that role is suited for that role, that their own design is aligned with that role, and so on. That's not always possible in the startup space. It's actually very difficult to do that. Most people in the startup space are wearing multiple hats anyway. Everyone is sort of doing a whole bunch of stuff. So when you're talking about collaboration being in the center of it and people going above and beyond to help each other out, how do you make sure that actually takes place before even hiring the person? Is that something that you what's the word, consider before even hiring someone? How do you ingrain or instill that culture of collaboration into your staff, into the workforce as a whole?
Usually, like startups, and even like a bigger organization as well, like the ones that are like very efficient and run very well, they have a well defined and strong culture, right? So you need to define internally what does it mean on your organization to collaborate, right? And I don't think there's a right way. It's just you have to just really define it, right? It goes from collaboration to execution. Define every single kind of like aspect of how the company will operate, and then from there everything just trickle down, right? When we think about hiring, for example, we've been thinking about hiring Harmonic or Blanket before, or even my own startup. Like we define the culture, and then from there we kind of create some sort of like rubric, right? Of like how does a person fit in this kind of like definition of our culture, and then from there you're trying to find the person that fits. The order in which we usually hire, or I usually hire, is that first, the person has to have a culture fit. Second, they have to have an attitude. And third, there is the skills, right? So that's how you really make sure that they actually fit, across the whole company, not only on the skills and the job, right? But everywhere, right?
Yeah, we do the same here. Whenever I interview, the skills is the last thing I look at too. Um, I don't even look at the resume until we have good chemistry and that the conversation is going in a way that is aligned. That the values align. You spoke about defining what the various terminology means. What is the culture of this place? That is what that is the root of my program, of the culture branding program, is truly defining very clearly what your fundamental non-negotiable values are, and ensuring that those values are honored always, whether it's with between team members or between customers and employees, or employees and leadership, or whatever. Always, at every interaction, even if it's a like non-verbal interaction, if it's through your documentation, through the way the office is set up, and so on. So yeah, that's really cool. Are your teams uh I guess let's go back in time a little bit. When did you start embracing the remote sort of culture, the remote dynamic? Is that something that's pretty prevalent in your work and office dynamics now, or is that something that you kind of avoid or you lean into?
I started working remote like long before COVID. So I'm a long remote,
Before it was cool.
before it was cool. Exactly. Now it's just too cool. Um, so for me, it's just like it matches my lifestyle and the
Mhm.
lifestyle of my family, right? It gives me the flexibility. I have 3 kids, like this craziness in our family, and having the flexibility to work from home, being able to go to school, pick up them, come back, and like all that thing helps me. So I was being embracing it. My wife also works remote, so it's been very important for us and for our family. Now, I do believe like there is some things that means it's not always happiness, right? And remote, there's a trade-off, right? You're giving as an individual, I think you're gaining, but for example, as a leader, it's really hard to lead a remote team. You're losing the serendipity of the office, which is very important. Sometimes it's the glue, of the team. You have to fabricate that. You have to foster open communication, so everybody has more context. There is actually an extra effort from a leader, in my opinion, but as an individual, I think is better.
Yeah, isn't that so ironic? I feel the same way because we're a design company. So the collaboration, I mean, you're a design company. It's the same thing. So the collaboration is paramount. I was comparing it the other day, um excuse me, because we had some friction in communication and expectations and so on over the last couple of weeks. Now we're fine, but everyone is everywhere. I think in not I think in Houston there's actually only me directly in Houston, and then someone two of my team are just outside Houston. And I was thinking about how when I was coming up, when I started as a junior graphic designer at 23 years old, and my mentor is the actual person who hired me. He was my creative director, and I worked under him for 5 years. Dude, I was sitting 12 feet away from him for 8 hours a day for 5 years. I mean, you can't even remotely compare that. I see my team face to face for like maybe an hour a week. It's insane. I mean, it's 1/40th of the time that I would experience my art director. And what you just described is perfect, because the energy is what you're absorbing. It's all that osmosis. Like, I'm watching Miguel handle customers and handle other team members and handle conflict and deal with all the office dynamics, and then you can just see him work, and you just learn it through osmosis. You can't even compare it. But then you don't have that freedom that we're talking about.
Exactly. Yes. So it's a trade-off.
Yeah, absolutely. So then what do you do in as someone who understands that dynamic and those nuances? How do you help teams sort of build momentum when they feel stuck, especially in this kind of remote environment? I mean, I'm looking for tips here. Like, what are like some nuggets that you could share with our audience to really get people motivated intrinsically when they need to be self-motivated?
Hmm. Yeah, and this is actually, as you said, like in remote culture or remote companies, it's even harder because you kind of like lose that feedback. Sometimes you don't see that person's face, and then that's, for me, it's very important because I am a very sensitive person, so I know when someone is kind of like changing from day to day. So I think, it all obviously, start with like analyzing. You first analyze what's going on. Feeling stuck is kind of like very different in the many different ways. So is it because there's broken communication, as you said? Sometimes it's because like teams are not communicating well. Is it because there is some technical challenge? In my case, maybe we're building something and they're getting stuck, or is it just because there's a lack of resources, right? And then there's been just grinding, and then just this pile of work that never goes down. So first, it needs to be analyzed, and once it's identified, I think some of the things that I look into immediately is what are the low hanging fruits that can be done so the people start feeling some little wins, and then it just creates a little bit of momentum and moves from there, right? Even if it's not the top priority. In startups, like, focusing on the top priorities are like key. You cannot lose any time, but in this case, I rather lose a little bit of like focus on the priorities and then create momentum so that people feel like, okay, things are moving. And to me, by the way, the best thing that a leader can do to get unstuck, and this is just remote or not, is to roll out your sleeve, get down to the trenches, and then be there pushing like anybody else, or even more than anybody else, and then do it in a high energy, happy face, like that's like that's really what helps. What I feel like helps, because the team tends to mimic the leader energy, right? So the more energy that you have, the more that you bring to any interaction, the team will just follow, right? So that's kind of like what I try. So you cannot have a bad day, especially on those moments. You're just there, just put in your face. Okay, let's do this. We're gonna get through this.
So tell me about that then. When you say roll up your sleeves, does that work? Have you found that that's equally effective remotely? Getting in there and doing the work for the same reasons I asked before. My instinct, because it's my own experience. No one's seeing you do it. They're just seeing the output. They're seeing the outcome. So how do you feel about that?
This is something very interesting because we've been working on this as well at Harmonic. By the way, Harmonic is kind of hybrid. It's like I came from a remote first startup, and I actually founded also a remote first startup, and now Harmonic is kind of hybrid. So it's actually even more interesting because some people are in the office, some people are not in the office, right? So how are we working about this? Because we have this problem as well. So we're doing like the base of like to fix this, in my opinion, is open communication. I think I saw this already here in our conversation. I think open communication is really important because the more that you put out there in our case it's Slack, right, in public channels, the more you write down how you think the problem that you're working on, the more that people see you, how you also think and how you go through it, and then you start tagging people. That is the way that people cannot absorb how you approach the problem. So we've been doing something interesting in Harmonic, which is called Ramble channels, which is basically we have we have channels that are kind of like for every project that we do, but then we have another channel which is Ramble. So when someone is kind of like doing their job and then they feel like something is going on, they go to that channel and then they start a thread like, hey guys, I found this thing, I'm working on this, whoever wants to follow along, let's do this. So then they just start like dumping information. I've been struggling with this, I tried this thing, I tried this other thing. So that then you see people just coming in, and then helping you help you right away, or just like a day after they might say, hey, I saw you rambling about this thing, I'm interested, how you do this other thing. So something as well that we did in Blanket, my previous startup, is that we have a metric at the end of the week where we measure how many of the messages were public versus private. And we have a goal to be 90% of the messages to be in public channels. If it was below, we were like, hey guys, maybe there's so many information being in private. Maybe we should try to be more open, because that's another thing. You might actually collaborate in private and then the rest of the company don't see it. Right. So those are the things that we're trying to. Just basically, you have to fabricate it, right? You have to force it. So
that's really smart. That's really cool. Is the does that work equally with? I assume you have contractors in the mix.
We don't have that many contractors in Harmonic. No,
so most if not everyone is full time.
Yes.
Okay. That definitely makes a difference too.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But absolutely. To be honest, we also been collaborating this way with customers ourselves. Like it's kind of interesting because we work with VCs, so it's a little bit easy. They usually are very techy. They're very forward into like adopting new ways of communication and whatnot. So, but one way that we kind of like do this as well with customers is like, I have customers in my Slack. They DM me, right? Or they basically send me a message whenever they have a problem. And then we have this, okay, let's hop on a call. There's no like formality of like send an email, get a Calendly, you know what I mean? Like it's all like much straightforward, like they're part of the team. And then we also create basically public channels with them where they can just throw. So we kind of like also apply this open communication with customers as well.
That I agree with that 100%. We try to enforce that as much as possible too. It's not always simple to get them into Slack, so oftentimes it's like a WhatsApp channel, and we're in there. But luckily, WhatsApp has a desktop feature, because otherwise it would just be a disaster. So speaking of Harmonic, can you walk us through how AI is actually transforming your organizational operations at Harmonic? And what does that mean for your team dynamics?
Yeah. So at Harmonic, we had this thing called, one of our values is like stay above the line, which means like the line kind of represents where the industry is at in terms of like adopting technology, in terms of like executing. And that line kind of keeps going up. Now it's accelerating, it's going up and up, and up even faster. So as an organization, we strive to be always above the line, always thinking ahead. And what is the next thing that we can do to be more productive and to basically accelerate, right? So in terms of how we use AI, we actually been very early adopters of like anything that came out in a way. Especially on the engineering side, we've been kind of like using different tools. I don't know. Probably the audience of this podcast might not be related with it, but there's so many different tools that allows you today to do, I don't know, 80% of your code be written by them instead of yourself, right? So one thing that we're doing is we haven't been
list a few. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Sorry. Yeah. So we've been using Cloud Code, we've been using Devin, we've been using Codex from OpenAI. We obviously use Windsurf and Cursor, Copilot on VS Code. There's a bunch of tools, and we build our own as well. We build our own MCPs that basically connect to our infrastructure. There's a bunch of stuff that we've been building. But I think the core of this is like actually one of our values is continuous improvement, right? We're always, basically, we foster people to learn new things continuously, right? And then we don't force anybody to use one specific tool. You might see someone using Windsurf, another one using, Cloud Code, another one using Codex. And then each one of them might actually learn. So we, as a unit, learn much faster. And then what you see is like, we started like converging into one tool because it's better, right? We explain to each other, hey, this is better because of this. We also have debates. People like, we have something called Eli 10, where like an engineer or someone from even go-to-marketing will come in and explain what they learned. And then there's this debate. Okay, I think this is better. This is not better. We use it for one project or not another. And then at the end of the day, people tend to kind of like converge into one tool. And that's how we try to, stay ahead in terms of like using AI. But it's being used everywhere. Like, I guess it's used as well for like meetings, taking notes, all that is kind of like it's table stakes for us. It's like, yeah, this is kind of like something that we had to use. But yeah.
Everyone has their avatar double.
Yeah, you don't know if someone is working or not. You may talking to the avatar of Miguel. No, just kidding. No, not that far, I guess.
Yeah. So you're doing speaking engagements. You have talks. You give talks to companies about applying the startup mindset. What does that actually mean? Why is it so challenging for established organizations to adopt a startup mindset, and how is it beneficial?
To me, I kind of like try to. There's so many different things that I learned during my experience working at startups, right? But I try to simplify it through three main principles that any organization can actually apply, and that I think will be beneficial. And it's actually difficult for them to apply, but like if you go through the process, you will see the benefits. So the three principles are: one is bias for action. Like if you see any startup, basically, the startups run lean. There is no time for bureaucracy. People needs to have autonomy and a high trust environment. And then you prove things not by theorizing, but by doing. So basically you figure out, okay, how can we do the first little step to prove that this strategy is going to work, right? And then iterate on it very quickly. The other principle is focus. Like startups, they usually don't have the resources that they are with that other companies have, that maybe are bigger, and they're competing with, and so they need to focus on what is important. So ruthless prioritization. It's like, prioritize really well what is important. And here's where leaders, I think, can also play a really important role, where they lay down the vision. Like, this is where we're going. This is the North Star. So everybody in the organization has a clear mindset. of where they need to do and where they need to focus. And the third one is extreme ownership. I'm a huge fan of the book, but extreme ownership means that you have full accountability on everything you do.
Yeah.
And then you basically have you have your team's back. Everybody can count on you at any single time. In a startup, there is no, this is not my job, right? There's no, like, as you said, like you're wearing different hats. And then at the end of the day, you have to rub your sleeves and then get at it. So having a strict ownership of anything you do and what is your responsibility end to end is very important. And I think this can also be applied to an organization. So I think I focus on those three things, which I think like, cannot resonate with anybody. And then when you talk to companies, they say, oh yeah, we have this dynamic here where someone just dropped the ball, right? And then they could have like done a better job with owning their own responsibilities. Or some people start saying, oh yeah, we have a lot of bureaucracy here, processes that are too long, there's too many telephone calls in between. There's a lot of things that you can apply to other organizations. Yeah.
Do you think, you talked about, I really love the extreme ownership pillar. I think that's really cool. It's something I believe in myself. I believe in offering people autonomy. I believe in people taking autonomy, owning whatever it is they're doing, learning. As what I always try to do when I train is learn everything. Just learn as much as you can about this organization, about the field, about the subject matter, about adjacent subject matters. When we're talking about design and design thinking, the entire man-made world is a product of design. So the more you read, the more you know, the more you understand how things work, how problems are solved, how things are built, how things interact with each other. Where everything in your background, for example, right now is interacting. There is a line of communication between inanimate objects, the shelves behind you, the shelves next to you. Those things are having some dialogue, even though we can't hear it. It makes us feel a certain way. There's an energy in the room. Why, when we walk into a certain room that is tight and low ceiling and kind of messy, we feel a certain way. And then when we walk into an open room that's high ceilings and brightly lit, we feel a different way. Why is that? And so I just love pushing just knowledge and education and just learn as much as you can. Do you find it, what are the like the challenges you run into when you try to instill this extreme ownership? Because I just find that fascinating, and I believe there's certain part of it that requires, and tell me if you disagree, that requires a certain leadership mindset in order to possess this extreme ownership, or maybe some people call it an entrepreneurial mindset. Right. What do you think about that?
So this is interesting, and maybe I'm going to take a turn on this, but I think it connects somehow. So to me, extreme ownership, even though it's a concept that's coming from the Navy SEALs and it's very like military related and whatnot. I think in order to be an extreme owner, you have to have a ton of vulnerability. Basically, meaning like you have to put yourself out and say, I made this mistake. This is what I did wrong, and this is what I'm going to do it right. To me, that's what extreme ownership also focus a lot on. And so as a leader, like, I think you have to be the first one taking a step forward and saying like, okay, this is what I did wrong. This is what I'm going to do next, and why I'm not going to make this mistake anymore, right? Taking extreme ownership of your mistakes as a leader, I think is the very first step that you can do to foster, this environment. Of course, people need to feel safe, like if every time someone just, take a step and like they might not, learn what they have to learn or made a mistake somewhere, then they might, they might feel fear and they don't really take that accountability. And they're going to start to feel like, this kind of like world dynamics. So you have to as well tell people that, it is safe to make mistakes. to make the same mistakes once, not twice, right? So you learn from on the second time. But the first time, just try things. It goes back to also bias for action, right? You cannot try things if you're afraid to fail. So that to me is kind of like the what leaders can do, to foster this kind of environment.
I really appreciate the vulnerability aspect of that. I think that's so true. And there is definitely a learning curve that comes with that, to be comfortable in being vulnerable. Definitely as a leader, it's certainly a leader's job and position and responsibility to fall on their sword, as it were, when a team member makes a mistake. But your client facing, your company facing, it's your responsibility to ensure that that doesn't happen again, in a way that's trained and that's responsible, to, again, echo what you said, to make the environment psychologically safe. A lot of people mistake psychologically safe as a soft environment. That is absolutely not true. A soft environment ignores accountability. It ignores, it actually is less compassionate, ironically. A soft environment is, quote, nice. An accountable environment, a psychologically friendly environment, is a kind environment, where you're having to say hard truths, but in a compassionate way, in a human way, right? I get into this argument a lot. I'm like, just because, don't mistake kindness for weakness is the old rule, right? And training your team to be comfortable being vulnerable, because they won't actually get in trouble if they're vulnerable. And it's okay to make mistakes. Just make them quickly. make
Exactly.
make mistakes today, not in 2 weeks when we have to deliver or something.
Exactly.
Right? Fail fast and fail forward.
Yes. Exactly.
You've worked with companies globally, right? You've worked with international teams and so on. How do you see that playing into the workplace dynamic? Like, what are key cultural differences you've observed between startup ecosystems around the world? How does intercultural relationships sort of impact that? And what is sort of the end impact on the customer as well? I asked sort of 3 questions there, but
okay, let's start with like the difference between startups in across different ecosystems. So I've been advising startups I work on US startups and like in US corporations. But I advise startups that in different countries, obviously in US, in India, in Spain. So one thing that is like different in the different ecosystems is that, especially in the Spanish one, they tend to think like very little of their self. They have like a very, they don't think globally out of the box. They think like little into the Spanish market and try to survive there first and then expand. I will think like in a way that is kind of like, forward to the future, the problem that you're going to face right away. And then one thing that I advise to them is, okay, as you build your company, think about how you're going to expand globally. Because when you compete with a startup that is in the US, they start in a market that is actually so big, so massive, so advanced that they don't have to do that right away. But you are starting in a smaller market, and you need to think about how you're going to expand right away. So I think, like, if you think about how this kind of like it's all about like resources as well, in a way, because like when you think about a startup that is actually growing in Spain or in India, they probably don't have this vast network that we have here in the US, or the easy access to money that we have here. So they need to play with like different kind of tools, that we do. And then this also obviously affects the customer in a way that the support that they get, or the features and the services they get, are not really at the same level that you have in the US. I argue that then what you have to really double down on is to be like really close to your customers, really have a tight communication with them. Try to be, the big players with like having a closer relationship with the customer. Find those customers that are willing to sacrifice a little bit on like the service maybe, but that they value that you are there to accommodate to their needs really quickly, and then have that tight communication. I would think like that's kind of like a way also to counter in a way. I don't know if I
Yeah.
answered actually your questions.
No, you did. You did. I also think that's just really, really good insight. I think that's powerful. So how has your experience as a public speaker, how long have you been doing public speaking now?
Well, like I did public speaking since I was in university. Like
Okay.
I used to go to like different kind of like cities and universities and then give talks about Microsoft technologies. I wasn't getting paid by Microsoft or affiliated with them, but I still like did it. That's how I got hired, I guess. So yeah, it's been a long time
For a while. Yeah.
Mhm.
Cool. And so one, what do you love about, what makes you so excited about public speaking? And then how has that shaped the way you communicate vision and build
Mhm.
culture at Harmonic or in any of the companies that you advise?
Yeah, there's this thrill. I don't know if you've been a public speaker as well, but it's a thrill to get on a stage. Like there's this rush that I get, like it's just energy. I just become like twice myself, and especially when you go out there and then you start talking with like high energy. I really like, showing my passion, my energy. And then connect to the audience, right? You can see it when they actually connect. They're like nodding, they're kind of like they're engaged, they're laughing, that kind of connection is so amplified because you get there, you're only one person, but then you get all that communicate visual and like physical communication to you, and it kind of like doubles your energy inside. I guess I'm an extrovert, right? So that shows. So to me, that's why I do public speaking, and then through this kind of like trial and error, when I go to stage, long time ago I started to go to stage and then see what works and what doesn't work. I felt like, what are the kind of ways that you should communicate for people to really relate with you? And then the first thing is like storytelling. I mean, this is, everybody talks about this, right? Like the more that you bring things that happens to you, the more that people can see the human behind what you're saying, the more that they engage, the more that they like what you're saying, right? So that's what I try to apply, on day to day. I think about like, okay, how can we apply, I think about the problems that we have, and then I do like a little speech, to the team, and I think about how can they relate to the problem that we have, the goal that we're going after, and how can I actually have empathy for them in their situation? Because sometimes you being a leader have a different kind of responsibilities that the team, and you might detach. But putting your mindset into like, how are they going to receive this, and how can I communicate in a way that kind of like communication that I also get on on the stage resonates there, and I get that like feedback from them, that what's going on.
Yeah.
I think to me that's what like I can apply on my day to day.
Yeah, that makes sense. I really appreciate the way you articulated that. That makes sense. So looking ahead, how do you see the role of product and engineering leaders evolving as we continue adapting to all the technological change that is happening?
Yeah. I mean, I've been asked this question so many times, or more broadly, like about AI. I'm gonna start saying that I'm not an AI doomer, right? I don't think AI is
Me
gonna
neither. Yeah.
is gonna take all the jobs, or it's gonna kill us all, right? I also don't feel that AI is gonna reduce creativity. I think AI is gonna boost creativity for those people that really have that creativity. What it's gonna reduce is like the copy and paste. So the same way, this applies to leadership and even engineering teams. Like I feel like AI is here to reduce those tasks and that job that is not meant to be done by a human. Like our uniqueness is on the way that we think, our way that we reason, the way that we connect with other humans, right? So doing like something like even like typing code, you know what I mean? Like, and just typing it. I mean, that's not human. A human is like, okay, I have this problem. I want to solve it. I want to try 3 different things. I want to figure out what is the right thing, and then I want someone else to code it, because that's not what a human, in my opinion, should be doing. So in a way, that's how it works. So you think about this. This is funny because the other way I saw this I think LinkedIn or X or whatever. They mentioned how like leaders were, or engineering managers were, the original vibe coders, meaning they were the original ones that you would just have a prompt and someone code for them. So it's kind of funny, but in a way that is going down, right? So now it's like that way of working is actually now individual contributors are the ones who now take that and then expanded it to like maybe 3 different agents doing the work for them, and then doing actually way faster and a higher quality, right? So I think that's how it's gonna play out. I think it's gonna be more about like focus on bigger problems and focus having humans focusing on what the humans should do, and less of the mundane kind of like repetitive task.
Again, well articulated. Thank you. So what is one thing you want to leave our guests with? So whether they're a leader or someone looking into getting into this work, what is something that they can all apply right away?
The same way that we can apply principles to startups, we can apply principles to ourselves. I mean, that's what I do myself, right? At the end of the day, you think about a startup is actually an organism in a way where they have different parts, but at the end of the day, the same kind of values can apply to the parts, right? So I think getting into this environment, right now, which is kind of chaotic, kind of like messy, I do believe that there is a ton of opportunity, right? There is, if you think about, for example, AI in particular, we were talking about AI. I think AI is just another industrial revolution, right? In a way, like it's just people are like 10 times more productive. But if you think about other industrial revolution, like the steam engine, for example, like not everybody could just apply that, right? It was like you have to have money to create a factory and then use people, and then it will like facilitate others, people with more resources. I think AI is gonna disrupt, and it's gonna actually give opportunities to people, to more like individuals, right? And you can see that like with a lot of companies that are being now founded by 1 or 2 people, they're getting really good profit and living really well out of it. So what I will suggest people coming into tech, coming into building product, is that get with this, take this mindset of like building a product that you are really passionate about, and then you find and you understand the audience that is actually going to benefit, and then just go for it. Just use the tools, get the tools out there, go for it. Don't wait for like having a team, ask for permissions or having resources. Just go for it, because right now, the time that we have, we're living in the best time to build any digital product, right? So I would say just go out there, try all the tools, and then have fun with it, right? That's what I would suggest.
Miguel, thank you so much for being here. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. I really want to continue this conversation. Awesome. I think we can actually get pretty philosophical about it. How can our guests find you if they want to reach out to you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is the main place. My handle, I guess I can share my handle, which is M Caballero Pinto. I mean, I can just share it probably in the episode or something. But LinkedIn is the place where I usually hang.
Fantastic. All right, brother. Well, thank you so much. Have a great weekend ahead, and we'll be in touch.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for having me again.